never thought I'd become the keeper of a secret worth more than my own house. But when my mother passed, she left me something I couldn't exactly deposit in a bank. A wooden box, heavy and old, lined with faded blue velvet. Inside it, her jewelry, not costume pieces or heirlooms you wear on holidays. Real gemstones, emeralds, sapphires, diamonds, pieces she'd collected for decades, hidden away from a world she never fully trusted. She told me on her deathbed, voice barely a whisper, "Keep them safe, Margaret. Not for money, for memory." So I did. For 10 years, that box stayed tucked in the far corner of my attic, behind Christmas decorations and boxes of old baby clothes. No one knew it existed, not my husband, not even my son, Daniel. Then came her, Sophie, my daughter-in-law. Beautiful, sharp, charming, too charming maybe, the kind of woman who always noticed the most expensive thing in any room. At first she played the perfect daughter-in-law, bringing me flowers, calling me Mom, offering to help around the house. I almost believed she was genuine. Until one day, while dusting the shelves, she asked too casually, "Did your mother leave you anything valuable?" The way she said valuable, like it tasted sweet on her tongue, made something cold crawl up my spine. I smiled politely. "Just memories, dear." But her eyes lingered on me, studying, like she knew I was lying. A week later, I found her in the attic. She claimed she was looking for old family photos, but the floorboard near the corner, the one hiding the jewelry box, had been moved. That was when I knew. She wasn't just curious. She was hunting. And if she wanted my mother's jewelry, she was about to find out that some secrets don't stay buried without a fight. The next few days, I pretended nothing had happened. I smiled at Sophie across the dinner table, passed her the mashed potatoes, asked about her new job. But every time she laughed, I noticed how her eyes darted upstairs toward the attic. She thought I didn't see. Daniel didn't notice a thing, of course. My son was too busy working late, trusting that his wife and his mother got along perfectly. He always said, "You two are the only women I can count on." If only he knew. That Friday, they both came over for dinner again. Sophie looked different. Expensive perfume, hair perfectly done, lipstick a little too bold for a family night. She complimented my necklace, the same one she'd mocked months ago for being vintage. Then, in her sugar-sweet voice, she said, "Mom, I was thinking, since Daniel and I are saving for a house, maybe we could help you clean out your attic this weekend. You know, organize some of that old stuff?" Her smile didn't reach her eyes. I set down my fork slowly. "That's very thoughtful," I said. "But I already went through it last month. There's nothing up there worth the trouble." Her jaw tightened for just a second before she caught herself. "Oh, of course." After they left, I went straight to the attic. The box was still there, but slightly shifted. Someone had been up again. The fine layer of dust I'd left deliberately on the lid was disturbed. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat in bed listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the faint ticking of the clock, waiting for dawn. My gut told me Sophie wasn't finished, and I was right. The next afternoon, Daniel texted me to say he had a work meeting and wouldn't make it by. But an hour later, I heard a car in the driveway. When I peeked through the curtain, it wasn't Daniel's sedan. It was Sophie's SUV, alone. I didn't move. I just watched. She walked straight into my house with a spare key I didn't even know she had, carrying an empty tote bag. My pulse hammered as I crept up the stairs behind her. Every creak of the floorboard felt like thunder. She went right for the attic ladder, pulled it down, climbed up. I followed, slow, silent, until I could see her shadow against the dim light filtering through the small window. She was on her knees, reaching under the old chest near the corner, exactly where the jewelry box was hidden. And when she lifted it, I heard her whisper, almost to herself, "Got you." I stepped out of the shadows. "Put it down, Sophie." She froze. When she turned, her face was pale, her hands trembling around the wooden box. I was just looking for photos," I said, my voice low, steady, because that excuse has already been used. Her eyes flicked toward the stairs, calculating like a thief cornered in her own trap. "I think," I said, stepping closer, It's time we had a little talk about what really brought you here." For a moment, neither of us moved. The only sound was the faint rattle of rain against the attic window. Sophie's fingers clenched around the box like she'd rather drop dead than let it go. "Put it down," I said again, quieter this time. She hesitated, then slowly set it on the floor between us. The box made a soft, heavy thud. "I wasn't stealing," she started, her voice small but sharp around the edges. "I just wanted to see what was inside. Daniel said your mother had some family heirlooms, and I thought—" "You thought what?" I snapped. "That you'd take a peek? Maybe sell a few heirlooms on the side." Her eyes flashed. "You don't understand. We're drowning, Margaret. Bills, the mortgage. Daniel doesn't tell you, but it's bad. Really bad. I just thought if there was something valuable, maybe you'd fix your problems with my mother's memories." Her lips trembled. "You don't even wear jewelry like this. It's just sitting here collecting dust." "That jewelry is all I have left of her," I said, my voice shaking now, not with fear, but fury. "Every piece has a story, a piece of her life, and you were about to pawn it for a few $1,000s. Sophie's eyes darted toward the attic door again. "You can't prove that." I took a step forward. "You're right, but Daniel will believe me." Her face went pale. "No, you can't tell him." "Oh, I can, and I will." She exhaled sharply, almost like a laugh, but it wasn't funny. "You think he'll take your side? He's already tired of your rules, your guilt trips. You treat him like a child." That stung, but I didn't flinch. "He's my son, and I raised him better than to marry a thief." Her composure cracked. "I'm not a thief," she shouted. "Then prove it," I said, crossing my arms. "Walk away from that box and never touch it again." She glared at me for a long moment. Then something changed in her eyes. Coldness. Calculation. "You don't get it," she whispered. "If you tell him, I'll tell him your secret too." I froze. "What are you talking about?" She smiled, a slow, poisonous smile. "The deed to the house. You think I don't know you forged your mother's signature when she got sick? I saw the papers, Margaret. All I have to do is show Daniel." My blood ran cold. "You're lying." "Am I?" The attic felt suddenly smaller, the air thicker. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. She took a step closer, her voice almost gentle. "So here's the deal. You forget about today, and I forget about what I found. We keep each other's secrets." I stared at her. This woman I'd welcomed into my home, trusted with my son, now blackmailing me over something she didn't even understand. And in that moment I realized something I hadn't before. Sophie didn't come here just for jewelry. She came for power, and she'd just declared war. That night I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Sophie's smirk, the way she'd thrown that accusation like a knife, knowing exactly where to aim. I knew she was bluffing. The deed wasn't forged. My mother had transferred the house to me legally when her dementia began. But Sophie didn't need the truth. She just needed the threat. And I wasn't going to let her win. By morning, my plan was already forming. I brewed my coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and waited. Sophie always came over mid-morning pretending to help me out while Daniel was at work. Right on cue, her car pulled into the driveway. She waltzed in like nothing had happened, cheerful, polished, eyes bright with false innocence. "Morning, Mom," she chirped. I smiled. "Morning, Sophie. I made cinnamon rolls." Her eyebrows lifted, suspicious but intrigued. She never turned down sweets. I poured her coffee, pretending to be relaxed, my voice calm and easy. "You know, I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, about the jewelry. You were right. Maybe it's time I do something with it." Her eyes lit up, just a flicker. "Really?" "Yes," I said smoothly. "In fact, I called a friend of mine. She runs a local appraisal company. She's coming tomorrow to take a look. Might as well find out what everything's worth." Sophie tried to hide her excitement behind a sip of coffee. "That's great, Mom. I'd love to be here for that if you don't mind." "Oh, I'd love that," I said, smiling sweetly. Because what she didn't know was that my friend wasn't an appraiser. She was a retired police detective. I spent the rest of the day preparing. I moved the jewelry box from the attic to my sewing room, setting up a hidden camera facing the shelf. I left it in plain sight, the lid just slightly open, the glint of a diamond visible from the doorway. Then I waited. The next afternoon, I told Sophie I'd be out running errands before the appraisal. I left the front door unlocked, just as she liked it. 2 hours later, my phone buzzed. Motion detected. When I got home, she was already there, standing in the sewing room, her hands deep in the box. The hidden camera caught everything. Her pocketing 2 bracelets, slipping a necklace under her sleeve, and whispering, "Sorry, Margaret. You don't deserve this anyway." I stepped into the doorway. "You're right, Sophie," I said, calm, cold. "I don't deserve this, but neither do you." She spun around, eyes wide, face pale. "What? How long?" "Long enough," I said, holding up my phone, the live recording still rolling. "Smile for the camera." Her expression broke. "You set me up." "No," I said, stepping closer. "You set yourself up the moment you stepped into my attic." She tried to talk her way out of it, pleading, crying, swearing she was desperate, that Daniel would never forgive me if I showed him the video. But this time, I didn't bend, because this wasn't about greed anymore. It was about respect, about my mother's legacy, about every ounce of trust Sophie had ground to dust. I looked her dead in the eyes and said, "Tomorrow, I'm showing Daniel everything. You have until then to decide what kind of woman you want to be when the truth comes out." And I walked away, leaving her trembling in my doorway. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Not yet. Because people like Sophie didn't admit defeat. They struck back. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the window, watching the rain slide down the glass, the camera footage playing over and over in my mind. Sophie's hands, her voice, her lie. It was all there. Proof so solid even she couldn't twist it. By morning I had the flash drive in my purse. My plan was simple. Tell Daniel everything before Sophie could poison him against me. But when I called, he didn't pick up. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. "Daniel." "Mom, we need to talk. Don't do anything rash, please." My stomach dropped. He knew. She'd beaten me to him. I drove to their house anyway. When Daniel opened the door, his face was tight, pale, conflicted. Sophie stood behind him, arms crossed, eyes red from crying. "Mom," Daniel said quietly, "she told me you accused her of stealing, that you set up cameras to spy on her." I met his gaze. "She's lying." Sophie's voice trembled, just enough to sound believable. "Margaret, I swear, I never touched that jewelry. You misunderstood. I was just curious. And she trapped me." Daniel turned towards me, pain in his eyes. "Mom, this sounds insane. Why would she steal from you?" "Because she did," I snapped, pulling the flash drive from my purse. "And this proves it." But when I tried to plug it into his laptop, nothing happened. The files were gone, deleted. Sophie gasped softly. A perfect performance. "See? There's nothing. She's trying to frame me." My hands trembled as I realized what had happened. She must have deleted the footage while I was gone. "Margaret," Daniel said carefully, "I think maybe you need rest. You've been under a lot of stress since Grandma passed." I looked between them. My son, my own flesh and blood, staring at me like I was the problem, while that viper stood behind him, pretending to be the wounded one. "Daniel," I said, voice breaking, "please listen. "Mom," he cut in, his tone final. "Enough." That single word hit harder than any scream. I walked out without another word. My hands were cold, my chest hollow. She'd taken everything. My mother's jewelry, my son's trust, even the proof of her guilt. But as I reached my car, a strange calm came over me. Sophie thought she'd won, but she didn't know me as well as she thought. Because the jewelry she'd taken, those weren't the real pieces, the real ones. My mother's actual treasures were still hidden, in a place only I knew. And now, I had one thing left to protect. Not just the jewelry, but my family's name. Sophie wanted to play dirty. Fine. I was done playing nice. 2 days passed in silence. Daniel stopped answering my calls. Sophie must have convinced him I was losing it, that I was paranoid, spiteful, unstable. She was smart, I'll give her that. Manipulation was her native language, but she'd made one mistake. She underestimated me. On the third day, she showed up at my house again. No invitation. She walked right in like she owned the place, wearing one of my mother's emerald necklaces, the fake one I'd left in the box. "Nice jewelry," I said from the kitchen doorway. She flinched but recovered fast. "I just came to pick up the rest of my things. Daniel doesn't think it's healthy for us to see each other for a while." "Healthy for me, you mean?" I said. She smiled, tilting her head. "You brought this on yourself, Margaret. You could have just shared what you had instead of hiding it." I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "You really believe you won?" Her smirk widened. "I know I did." That's when the doorbell rang. Her expression shifted, just slightly. I opened the door and stepped aside. 2 officers stood there, one holding a small folder. "Mrs. Bloom?" the taller one asked. "We'd like to ask your daughter-in-law a few questions regarding a report of attempted fraud and theft." Sophie's face went pale. "What? What are you talking about?" I turned to her, calm and steady. "About those appraisals you made last month, the ones you tried to sell under my mother's name." Her mouth fell open. "That's not—" "Oh, it is," I said. "The pawn shop called me when you brought them in. You used your real ID, Sophie. You might have deleted my video, but you left a very convenient paper trail." The officer handed her a summons. "You'll need to come with us, ma'am." She looked at me then, all that arrogance gone, replaced by pure panic. "Margaret, please, don't do this. Daniel will never forgive you." I held her gaze. "Maybe, but at least now he'll finally see who you really are." They led her out, her protests echoing down the hall. When the door closed behind them, the house fell silent again. I stood there for a long time, breathing. Then I went upstairs, climbed to the attic, and pulled back the loose floorboard. The real box, the one with my mother's true jewelry, still sat where it always had, untouched. I opened it slowly, the soft glint of the emeralds catching the afternoon light. My mother's ring was on top, the one she'd worn every Sunday. I slipped it onto my finger, whispering, "I kept it safe, Mom, just like I promised." Later that evening, Daniel showed up. His eyes were red, voice tight. "Mom, I'm sorry," she confessed. I nodded. "I know." He hesitated. "You must hate her." I looked at him, tired but calm. "No, I pity her, because people like Sophie never understand. Real worth isn't something you steal. It's something you protect." He hugged me then, the first real hug in months. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I felt something deep inside me settle. The storm was over. And as for Sophie, she'd learned that greed always takes more than it gives. I went upstairs one last time that night, locked the attic door, and smiled. The secret was safe again, and so was I.